Good morning. On behalf of Executive Director Mike Borges and the New York State ASBO Board of Directors, I welcome you to a webinar on the 2016 state budget. This is Deborah Cunningham, and I am Director of Education and Research at New York State ASBO. Before I begin, I just want to go through a few logistical details. We have sent people who have registered for the webinar a copy of today's presentation, and it is also available by email, and it is also available on the GoToWebinar control panel. If you look there, you'll see a PDF that you can download and print out. We will also be posting this recording and the handout subsequent to the webinar, so you'll have good access to the materials. Also, concerning questions, I would ask you to email your questions to Kim Shannon, a Deputy Research Director at New York State ASBO. Her email address is kshannon@nysasbo.org. Then we will take questions that pertain to the content I'm discussing as we go, and any general questions we'll save for the end. And we will continue to study the budget following this webinar and add additional material to the presentation as we learn more that's relevant for you. Okay. So I am going to go give you a high-level overview of the budget, and then discuss the general purpose aids, the gap elimination adjustment, and foundation aid. Tell you what happened with the expense-based aids, and about the new community schools aid that was enacted, a little bit about receivership schools, and what, from our perspective, the budget did not include, and then conclude with some important references for you to follow up with. So the budget provided for a 5.9%, $1.35 billion increase in state aid to school districts for school year 2016-17 compared with the prior year. This included a foundation aid increase of $627 million and a requirement that 225 school districts set aside $100 million as community schools aid in amounts that were included in the executive budget proposal. New York State ASBO had requested $800 million in foundation aid and $75 million for struggling schools in the receivership program. The gap elimination adjustment was fully eliminated at about $434 million, which is also was a proposal that ASBO had made. And expense-based aids were fully funded at $342 million, which New York State ASBO had also recommended. So overall, a good, strong budget. This next slide lists dollar amounts for each of the categories of aid, so you can see the dollars and the percent change for each. I would just point out some of the highlighted rows, the 5.9% increase in total school aid, bringing the total to $24.2 billion, and the $1.35 billion increase, and then remaining GEA of 0. You'll also see below the total line $50.7 million in final GEA payment, which we're going to be discussing in the future, but that was also included. So the gap elimination adjustment was fully restored in two ways. $383 million was provided in a GEA restoration and $51 million in a GEA final payment. Now, the law provides for 4 tiers, and the 2016-17 restoration is the sum of those 4 tiers. Tier 1 was for all districts 40% multiplied by the executive proposal's gap elimination adjustment. Tier 2 for high need resource capacity school districts, 100% multiplied by the executive proposal GEA. For average need resource capacity school districts with a combined wealth ratio less than 0.7, also 100% multiplied by the executive proposal GEA. And for average need resource capacity school districts with a combined wealth ratio greater than 0.7, 51.6% multiplied by the executive proposal GEA. So you'll see in tiers 1 and 2, not all of the aid is provided. So they did the GEA restoration in 2 steps, the GEA restoration and then the final GEA payment, which is the difference between what was left after the restoration and the total GEA owed to school districts. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more because it is confusing and has thrown everybody off, and we were sort of expecting to see a complete GEA restoration of $434 million, not these 2 pieces. But they did restore the GEA completely with these 2 different items, the GEA restoration and the final GEA payment. The GEA is eliminated for now and in the future. So if you're interpreting the computer aid runs and you have a final GEA payment, you must add that to your district's number for total to get the actual total 2016 aid amount. It's below the line, as it were, but it should be added in. And to get the change in total aid for your district, you would add that final GEA payment amount to the line that's labeled dollar change 1617 minus 1516. So those dollars are going to you. All school districts have a remaining GEA of 0. And then the other point that I would make, because people have been somewhat confused about having the final GEA payment separate, that will be reflected in the 2016-17 base for determining 2017-18 school aid. That is, that GEA money will be recurring each year. So the Wicked Witch is dead. There have been some discussion questioning whether that's really true. But the law which established the GEA now reads, the gap elimination adjustment for the 2016-2017 school year and thereafter shall equal 0. So in order to resurrect the gap elimination adjustment, it would be necessary for the Senate and Assembly to pass a new bill and the governor to sign it. I read one reporter was describing this and saying, we're unlikely to see those 3 letters ever again. And I do think that is true. I don't think the GEA is coming back. Now, just a comment on why they did it this way. I think it reflects the legislative process and legislative priorities. They started with the executive proposal, and then they provided a legislative add-on, which was the GEA restoration, to get to regional shares and to demonstrate that they had provided for those regional shares. And then they had $50.7 million left over, and due to the strong legislative recommendation to fully eliminate the GEA, they then made a final GEA payment to completely finish the program. So I think there is no hidden agenda. I think it just reflects the legislative process and their priorities to fully eliminate the GEA. So moving on to foundation aid, for those of you that have joined the webinar recently, I'd remind you to send your questions to Kim Shannon at ASBO. She's at kshannon@nysasbo.org. So foundation aid is calculated as the sum of your 2015-16 foundation aid base plus a foundation phase-in increase plus your 2016-17 foundation aid as computed for the executive proposal, plus community schools aid on the executive computer run. So it's the sum of those four. So the big addition here is the foundation phase-in increase. So the foundation phase-in increase equals your foundation aid phase-in percent multiplied by your 15-16 foundation aid base. It's as simple as that. It's the percentage increase over your base. And the law sets forward a number of different phase-in increase percents. For New York City, 7.784%. For Buffalo, 7.03%. Rochester, 6.72%. Syracuse, 9.55%. Yonkers, 6.74%. For small city school districts with a combined wealth ratio less than 1.49%. And for urban, suburban, high needs resource capacity school districts, 0.719%, so less than 1%, which is an add-on to number 6 for those urban, suburban, high needs school districts that are also small city school districts. For rural, high need resource capacity school districts, 13.6%, and for all other eligible school districts, 0.47%. Okay, the expense-based aids increased $342 million, or 5.2%. And ASBO had recommended $411 million, which was the amount for fully funding the aids at that time. Apparently the numbers have changed a little bit with the February database. BOCES aid continues the $30,000 aidable salary cap. ASBO had recommended an increase in aid for career and technical education teachers, both in BOCES programs and in the Big 5 cities. The largest increases were high-class public access cost aid at 7.4%, BOCES aid at 6%, and the building aids at 5.89%. Also on the expense-based aids, I would note that the interest rate recalibration was deferred until 2017-18 for effective projects. So I would just add a little caveat that if you are affected, you should check your tax cap data filed with the state comptroller to ensure that you have accounted for the additional building aids. The law provided for a set-aside for 225 school districts within foundation aid of $100 million. The amounts are from the executive budget proposal, and it adds a new paragraph to Section 3602 of the education law that each school district shall use the amount so set aside to support the transformation of school buildings into community hubs to deliver co-located or school-linked academic, health, mental health, nutrition, counseling, legal, and or other services to students and their families, including but not limited to providing a community school site coordinator or to support other costs incurred to maximize students' academic achievement. So I know this begs a lot of questions. How is a set aside? How should it be accounted for? How is it going to be managed? I think we have to wait and hear from the State Education Department how this will be handled. At this point, this is pretty much all we know, the dollar amounts and the stated purpose.
Deborah?
Yes.
I'm going to pause you there because I got about 5 questions with community schools aid. I have a feeling that they're all going to be answered. I have a feeling it's all going to be answered by what you just said, but I just want to let people know that we're looking at their questions. So, so you just said that we don't know anything further regarding the reporting, right? That was one question that I had.
Yes.
Now another question is, what do they mean by or to support other costs incurred to maximize students' academic achievement? Do you have any idea what that could mean?
Well, I think it is in the community schools aid, or the community schools paradigm, which is collaborating to provide a number of services that are needed by students and their families to maximize student learning. So I think specifically, I'm not sure exactly what that would include, but it's like they left kind of a catch-all because they know things will come up and that school districts can make a case that this is funding that will help maximize student learning and it fits within the community school model. So I don't have specific examples, but I think it's very positive that they put that in there to leave some flexibility for school districts to implement this and provide for this and to spend these funds.
Okay, and so we would not be able to answer whether they could use instructional coaches' salaries for that, right? Or use that for instructional coaches' salaries.
I think that I would rather not be that specific at this point because there's no guidance out. All we have is these general guidelines. So I think it's premature to be saying specifically what would be covered and what we wouldn't. I think we have to wait to see if SED is going to come out with some guidance and then go from there and take some direction from what they say. You know, I do know this is important initiatives to help school districts that have considerable poverty meet the needs of their students, but there is no pre-existing program that I'm aware of in the state education department, so we really do need to learn more.
Okay, and then I assume that this one will also probably be a similar answer, but I'm going to ask it just so that everyone knows that I'm not missing their questions. Would we need to budget these items in distinct budget lines for audit purposes?
Say that again?
Would we need to budget these items in distinct budget lines for audit purposes?
Yes, well, I know this issue came up with contracts for excellence too, and I think since it's a set aside, it should be accounted for separately. I know this is complicated with the general fund, so we really do need to hear some guidance from SED, and they'll probably collaborate with the comptroller on that. But I would say at this point, you should have some separate accounting.
Okay, and I'm just going to, I got a number of other community schools questions, but I do think that they're all going to be similar questions. So for any questions that had asked me about specific things that would be included under that provision that we were mentioning, I'm going to assume that those would all be the same answer and that those questions were probably asked before Deborah had given that answer, that we're not sure specifically as to what that would include. So I'm just going through the questions now. I got questions about guidance counselors. I got questions about extended school day, extended year, and my understanding is that we just don't know the answer to that question right now.
So if you can make a case that the expenditure supports the transformation of school buildings into community hubs to deliver co-located or school-linked services within those areas, I think then that is your argument. You know, as we learn more about this, we'll be reaching out to the state education department and trying to understand what their plans are for this, and we'll keep people posted as we go through. And on the questions, if we think that a question has already been asked, we will not re-ask it, but afterwards we will go through and look very carefully, and if there's any material that we need to further address, we will address that and include that in updated materials on the budget.
I got another question. Where do we see the list of the 225 schools? I believe that's coming up, and I believe that the answer is that they could find it in, is that the Aid to Localities bill, Deborah?
Yes, so no, they can find it right in this presentation, and here it is on the screen. It's on these two slides. So you will have this now when you print out this presentation. It's in alphabetical order by school district name. And I would just point out that my understanding is that these school districts all have some kind of low performance. It includes all of the high-need school districts except for one, I believe. We did a check, and it didn't include Elmira Heights, but all other high-need school districts, and it included 22 average-need school districts and no low-need school districts. Most of the school districts were either small or had enrollments below 1,500 students. And in terms of the regional breakdown of the districts, it was about 8% of the districts in each of the Capital Region, Central Region, Finger Lakes, Hudson Valley. At Long Island, it was about 5%. So we just did a little look to see where this money is going. All right. There were some changes related to the school tax relief program. There was an executive proposal that new homeowners will receive their STAR tax benefit as an income tax credit rather than a reduced tax bill from the districts, as has happened in the past. So in the past, the state sent money to the district, and the district sent out a lower bill. For new homeowners, they'll get the full bill in the fall, and then in the spring, they will get a credit on their income tax. Let's see. It also converts the New York City personal income tax credit, STAR tax credit, to a New York State personal income tax credit. This is no change in the credit amounts, but just switching it to simplify the process so it goes directly through the state income tax system and doesn't involve a payment to the district, as I understand it. And then it rejected the executive proposal to hold annual growth at 0 for the basic and enhanced STAR credits. Okay, receivership schools. The enacted budget also rejected the governor's proposal to require 70 schools which had improved their performance to remain in the receivership program. These schools had recently been removed from the list by the State Education Department because they improved their performance. And there was a little bit of discussion about this at the last minute, and the enacted budget rejected this proposal. In all other respects, the receivership program stays the same. Not included in the budget, we had recommended that the state use its large fund of bank settlement funds for one-shot expenses related to paying all prior year adjustments. It was about $318 million, and the budget included the same level as last year, $18.6 million to pay these prior year adjustments. So I think we argued at this rate it would take about 16 years for a school district that had a prior year adjustment due now to get paid, and that the state should settle this once and for all. They didn't go for that. Not included also was a $75 million increase in BOCES aid and special services aids to strengthen career and technical education around the state. And then the budget did not include the parental choice in education tax credit, which New York State ASBO had opposed as siphoning important funds away from public education. And it also includes a foundation aid increase of about 15%, whereas New York State ASBO had said we need to deliver on foundation aid over the next 4 years and completely pay the $4.4 billion, or about 25% every year. We had recommended $800 million. They provided $627 million. If you add the $627 million to the 434 GEA, that's over $1 billion that was provided in general purpose aid. We would have liked to have seen a commitment to fully fund foundation aid. That didn't happen, but it is definitely moving in the right direction, and I think we are very appreciative for the strength of this budget. Okay, also not included in the budget was we had asked strongly that the link between approved 3012D professional review plans and the state aid increase for 2015-16 and 16-17 be severed. But that link is still there. But this is an important issue for us, and we, together with the Education Conference Board, have written letters on this, and I think this will continue to be a topic of conversation during the session. Also, and the same can be said about the receivership law. The Education Conference Board, of which New York State ASBO is a part, had recommended a series of changes to make the program more supportive of school districts' efforts to improve and less punitive, and that was not changed, but I think the education groups will keep this in front of the legislature. And then finally, there were the adjustments that were included in the budget in 2015 at the discretion of the Commissioner of Tax and Finance and never implemented. We had asked that those be implemented in the 2016 budget. That did not happen. New York State ASBO had recommended that we either provide additional aid or tie the tax cap to a flat 2% and implement these changes of flexibility, including BOCES capital expense in the capital exclusion and counting pilot assessments relating to pilot agreements in the tax-based growth factor, that those be implemented, but they have been not addressed. Okay, there's what I've given you here is the Aid to Localities bill reference, and these are live links, so you can click on them and go to those bills, and the Education, Housing, Labor, and Family Assistance bill, which has much of this language in which we have been studying and will continue to study. Also, I have the links for the school aid runs so that you can see those if you haven't already. And the fourth reference is 2016-17 state aid projections, including estimates of 15-16 and 16-17. So that's available on the state aid office website at the State Education Department, and that provides a lot of helpful information. If you want to delve into something, that material is very reflective of the law, but written in perhaps more understandable manner. And then the last letter is a letter of the Education Conference Board, which just came out yesterday, clarifying the 2016 law relating to the GEA. We wanted to make it very clear what was intended by this scenario where they had a restoration and a final payment, and that letter will provide you additional detail and hopefully make you feel comfortable that the GEA is gone. So that gets us to questions. And
so Deborah, I have about 10 or 11 questions for you here.
All right.
That I have been, I was not able to filter through them in the time that we were talking about them. So I'm just going to read them in the order that I received them.
Sure.
Regarding GEA, on the slide where it states that the GEA will now become part of the base for calculating 17 through 18 aid, is the figure the full original GEA figure or simply the final payment we just received as part of this budget?
It would be the full figure, so it would be the sum of your GEA restoration and your final payment.
Okay. I did get a number of questions regarding foundation aid and the phase-in increase that I have not been able to read yet. So this says, if I'm understanding it correctly, since I'm in a low-need district, I would fall in item number 9, I guess, in the foundation aid phase-in increase. Item number 9, and therefore should have received an increase in my foundation aid, albeit very small. Is that accurate, or is the key word in number 9 eligible, which means there's a whole other set of factors which would make my district ineligible for even that small bump?
Well, I think that's a good question. What does the word eligible mean? But I believe it's all school districts that get foundation aid, all major school districts with 8 or more teachers would be eligible school districts, and they would receive at least an increase of 0.47%. I think last year it was 0.37. So no, I think that would go to all school districts. So if you are a low-need school district, you would be getting that at least. And this should be verified in your aid run. So go look at that and see that there is an amount, and you can actually calculate the percentage increase.
Okay. Another question, the budget provided increases to charter schools. Will that come directly from the state, or will it be added to the tuition that districts must pay to charters?
Okay, that's something that I think we're going to have to look into a little further and add later. As I understand it, there was, I believe it was $54 million set aside for a Senate bullet aid that was going to be earmarked for charter schools, but I don't have any information beyond that. So I think that's something that we will dig into a little bit further and see if we can add material to our budget update.
Another question, did CTE rates increase at all for Big 5 schools?
My understanding is no. And if you look at the slide that shows the dollars, you can see special services aid only increased 0.4%, I believe it is. The go-to webinar control panel is covering that part of it, but let me see if I can get to it. No, I can't.
Oh.
But what does it say, 0.4%?
Looking at special services, 0.4%.
Yes, yes. So that tells me that BOCES expenses is what's driving the BOCES aid increase, and special services aid did not have a similar increase, which is what we had proposed.
Okay. One question regarding the expense-based aids. If you go back to that, you have a bullet item, largest increases, building and building reorg incentive aid, 5.89%. Can you reiterate what you mentioned regarding the interest rate?
Oh, yes. So the law specified that interest rates should be recalibrated or recalculated every 10 years if the statewide interest rate dropped by or changed by more than 0.25%. And so that's been actually due for several years now, about 3 years. And this interest rate recalibration was deferred again until 2017-18. So state aid office will put out information on projects that are affected. But if you are affected, it means that you will be getting a little bit additional state aid because this isn't going through. So you get a little bit additional building aid, and it's important in your when you do your capital exclusion for the tax cap, that you count this aid in your calculation. So if you are an affected district, you should look closely at your capital exclusion to make sure that additional building aid is counted.
Okay. Let me see. Regarding the foundation aid phase-in again, the foundation aid phase-in seems to suggest a phase-in amount for all districts. However, foundation aid appears to have been frozen for a substantial number of districts. Could you address the process of the phase-in and the timeline of such?
So this is not a freezing, but it's saying we're going to increase foundation aid by a small percent. And let's just say we've got 100% to phase in to get to the full foundation amount. It's only going by about 7% for most school districts, 13% for high-need rural school districts, and many other school districts only less than 1%. So it's not freezing per se, but it is relatively small increases when you're trying to get to 100%, and that's why we had wanted for the legislature and the governor to really make a substantial payment, and given the GEA, we'd recommend that at $800 million. So now this foundation aid issue is the issue of the day, really, now that GEA is gone. And I think that will be discussed widely. And in fact, New York State ASBO is planning a symposium on this topic this year. So we wanted the legislature and the governor to commit to a 4-year phase-in, much as they did in 2007, and then have the resolve to follow through on that, to provide a sound basic education, the opportunity for a sound basic education to all children within a defined period of time. They didn't do that, so we don't know what's going to happen in the out years, but we do know that this will be heavily discussed, and we think now that the GEA is gone, we're in a position to address this. So we will be pushing hard for this phase-in. And if you think about it, more than $1 billion was put to general purpose aid, so we know the state can do it. If we can get more than $1 billion each of the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to be close. So we'll have to see what happens with the ultimate phase-in of foundation aid.
It seems that the community schools amounts correlate to the phase-in. I'm still uncertain, though, about the phase-in description indicating an amount for all districts and many districts not receiving an increase. Can you speak more to that?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand the question. Is the question that the community schools aid corresponds to the phase-in?
I believe that that's at least part of the question. Does it seem like that seem like that corresponds to the phase-in?
Yeah, I don't believe. Well, perhaps. What I did was I took a look at the dollar amounts of the community schools aid, and I looked at the enrollment, and then I said, well, how many dollars per pupil does this represent? Is it the same dollar amount per pupil for all the school districts? And no, it isn't. It varies from about $26 per pupil to I can't remember what it was, maybe $250 per pupil. So they have equalized the amount somehow. And you could argue that these phase-in percents are equalized to some extent, but not strictly. So I think the community schools aid distribution is separate from the phase-in percents. Personally, I think the phase-in percents were all aimed at getting the regional shares just the way they wanted. And that's why the high need resource capacity districts got a 13.6% increase. So I don't think they're related, but we will continue to look at this, and as we learn more, we will let people know.
Did we ever figure out what makes a district eligible for community schools aid?
Well, my understanding is it's low-performing school districts, and as I said, all of the high-need school districts were included except one, and then about 22 of the average need school districts. So no, I don't have the exact criteria that were used, but I'm interested in seeing what comes out of Ira Schwartz's office, and if he can identify a list of 225 school districts that have some evidence of low performance. I think the whole issue was student performance. That's how this got started. It came out of the receivership program. So it's an area that we will keep watching and digging and see if we can get some collaboration going with SED on.
Foundation aid did not increase for many districts in Westchester County. Do you know why?
I just got that question in front of me, and I am it gets at that word eligible, and I am wondering if school districts that were fully funded, if they did not get an increase. So that's another thing that we will have to explore a little bit further to know for sure. But that may be what happened is the foundation formula started with the operating aid formula that was in place before it, and it did not have a big component of need in it or regional cost. And so when we switched over to foundation aid, there were big differences in how school districts were funded with this aid, and they were held harmless against loss. So we've continued to perpetuate those differences in the funding system. And so about 222 school districts are overfunded with full foundation aid, and the balance, which is I think about 450 school districts, are underfunded. So it may be that they did pick on those school districts that are overfunded to not get an increase, but I'm just speculating. We will need to study this and pull it apart a little bit more to know for sure.
Right, so then we will, for the questions that I got when people said that their foundation aid increased 0, then we'll look in to see exactly how that
identify those, and I just did get the enacted budget computer runs yesterday, so we'll be able to look at that and get some answers.
Okay, do we know anything about funding for universal pre-K?
I think right now I don't have those numbers right on the top of my head, so let me add that to the list, and we will provide that information.
Okay. I didn't hear about anything about funding for lead testing in the Enacted. Did you?
No, I don't. I haven't heard anything about that.
Okay.
But there is some information on school security, but that's a little bit different, which we'll be looking at as well.
Okay. Can you further explain the changes to the STAR program? Is there anything we didn't mention regarding STAR?
Okay, let me see if I can get that slide. Okay. So when a homeowner moves into a school district, they and only the new homeowners are going to receive their STAR benefit as an income tax credit rather than getting a reduced tax bill from the school district. Right now, the state pays the school district, so the school district can then provide a reduced bill to the taxpayer. With this change, for new homeowners only, they'll provide the full tax bill in the fall, and then the homeowner will be able to apply for an income tax credit in the spring. For New York City, the enacted budget converts the New York City personal income tax STAR credit to a New York State personal income tax credit, and my understanding is that's a simplicity that saves the state some some process, but does not affect the actual credit to New York City taxpayers. And then there was an executive proposal to hold annual growth in STAR benefits to 0, and that was rejected. So the inflationary increases for both the basic and enhanced STAR credits will continue.
Okay. I had gotten some people sending further questions about STAR, but there are a lot of articles and things that they've sent for us to read about that. So we will send out, we'll send or post further information about STAR if we have anything other than that. And in regard to this entire presentation, any further information that we find after reading articles and everything that everyone recommended, we will be sure to post or send out. Another question, does the paid 12 weeks of leave run concurrently with sick leave?
So you were asking me at the Family Medical Leave Act?
Yeah, I assume this is regarding the paid family leave. So does the paid 12 weeks of leave run concurrently with sick leave?
Let's see. I don't know the answer to that. Let me look into that and see if we can get some information out. I think that there is the employer is obligated to pay something like 60% of the salary to the employee. So I would guess that you could use your sick time and then use your Family Medical Leave Act time on top of that, or after your sick time was used up. That's my guess, but I think that's something that we need to look at.
Okay. How do we keep track of those, regarding STAR changes, how do we keep track of those properties receiving the adjustment before paying the bill versus those getting a tax deduction?
I think the law requires, I think the law says the school district will provide the same tax bill without the STAR credit if the person was not on their assessment list for the year, for the 15-16 year. So if anyone comes to you and they weren't there the year before, then it applies to them. I think that's how it works. So you're going to need to know who was a taxpayer in 15-16, and then if they were not on that list and they come in 16-17, they would be a new homeowner.
Okay. How does the state define rural high needs?
Well, it is related to population per square mile, and there is, in the region state aid proposal, there is a listing of that. Let me see if I can get that quickly. But I think it's something like less than so many students per square mile. Why don't you go on, Kim, and I'll see if I can find that.
Okay. We have another question. Actually, I'm sorry, that's a similar question to what we had already seen. Anything regarding, I got a lot of questions regarding that foundation aid increase smaller than 0.47. So we've already answered that, and if we have any further information, we'll mail it out. How will, you kind of already answered this a little bit, how will the paid family leave provisions in the budget impact school districts?
Yes, and I think that's something that we might want to add to this material, and it's something that we don't have a lot of information at this time, but we will add that.
Okay. All right. hold on, I'm sorry, I'm just sorting through these questions. There's a lot of them.
Oh, I have the information on the high need rural. It's fewer than 50 students per square mile. And you need to know that all the school districts in New York State are arrayed according to a measure which is called the Need Resource Index. And need is student poverty. Resource capacity is measured by combined wealth ratio, and it's the ratio of your student poverty to your combined wealth ratio. All the school districts are arrayed in the state. The top 30% are high need. The bottom 20% are low need, and the middle 50% are average need. And then the high need rural are all those districts at or above the 70th percentile in the Need Resource Index, which have fewer than 50 students per square mile, or fewer than 100 students per square mile, and an enrollment of less than 2,500. So this is where I'm getting this is from the Region State Aid proposal. If you go to the Management Services website and go to the 2012-13 proposal, because that's when I left the department and they stopped including this, but that is still operative. The formulas work with the 2008 Need Resource Capacity categories and the 2003 Need Resource Capacity categories, and they specify in the law which they pertain to. So I think on the foundation aid, it will most certainly be the 2008 Need Resource Capacity categories.
Okay, another question, will the taxpayer still get a refund check for the 16-17 fiscal year if a school district stays under the tax cap?
Yes, we are expecting a STAR tax rebate check to go out in 16-17 by October 31st, if practicable, and it is in the amount of $185 outside the Metropolitan Commuter Transportation District and $135 within the Metropolitan Commuter Transportation District. So those two amounts are set. Then in the 2 subsequent years, there is a STAR tax credit, which is related to a percent of the STAR savings, which I think will be even larger amounts. And that is if school districts stay within the cap.
Thanks, Deborah. Just a note, we've gotten a lot of questions regarding STAR. We're going to hold a special webinar just to address STAR. So to our audience, stay tuned for information about that coming up. So if you've asked a question about STAR and we don't answer it in this particular webinar, it will be answered in another webinar that we'll let you know about. And then for any questions regarding need resources category, I believe that we did just answer that. So I think those are all the questions that I can find that we could answer at this point. If you've asked a question that I have not yet asked, it's possible that we might be looking into that, and we will send out that information. If you think that I didn't get to your question, feel free to send me an email after this, and we will post anything, any information further for in either Connect or in Newswire, so just stay tuned for that.
Yes, and if you have questions that come up after this time, we want to hear them. So please let us know what your questions are and concerns, and this has given us a lot of areas to follow up on, and we thank you for your participation. So any other questions, Kim?
No, I believe that there was something about minimum wage, and I'm going to send out information. I don't believe that we have that information right now, so we will send out further information regarding that and other issues soon.
Okay, all right, terrific. Everybody for joining us, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.